Since I'm getting remarried, it's necessary for you to find another place to live. The responsibility of the $105,000 loan will now fall to my new partner," he stated, his voice laced with a hint of irony. After years of diligently working to pay off the loan, I was astounded by his nerve to pass the obligation on to his new wife. "Then I suppose the $6,000 monthly payments will now be on your shoulders," I retorted, making it clear just how much of the financial load I had been carrying alone. Without hesitation, I continued, preparing the divorce papers. "And from here on out, whatever challenges arise, even if it's a tough road ahead, it no longer concerns me. My name is Sarah. I'm a 43-year-old housewife who works part-time. My soon-to-be ex-husband, Peter, is 4 years my senior, and we've been married for a decade. We originally met at a company where we both worked. Back then, I was fully focused on my career, with little thought of marriage or romantic entanglements. However, upon turning 32, a coworker convinced me to change jobs, which led to a new phase in my life. Shortly after, Peter, a senior colleague from my previous job, declared his feelings for me. From the outset, our relationship was framed with the prospect of marriage in mind. Despite some hesitations, we married 3 years later, largely due to external pressures. Peter's parents were incredibly supportive, treating me as their daughter, which eased my transition into married life. A year into our marriage, we built a house that symbolized our shared aspirations and commitment, although it required us to take on a hefty loan with a long-term repayment plan. We functioned as a typical working couple for the initial years, supporting each other's dreams and managing our financial obligations together. 4 years into our marriage, just when we started considering having children, Peter revealed he was planning to quit his job to start his own business. His lifelong dream was to be an entrepreneur before he turned 41, and he had secretly been laying the groundwork, building connections, and saving money. Although his business venture was shrouded in uncertainty, Peter's commitment never wavered. I only found out about his resignation when it was already a done deal. This lack of communication was disheartening, especially as Peter had assumed my earnings would be enough to support us during this transition. Not long after he launched his business, we faced a family crisis. My father-in-law fell seriously ill and needed hospital care. It quickly became apparent that he wouldn't be able to go back to living as before, and his home would require significant modifications to accommodate his health needs. Despite my in-laws' insistence that they could handle it financially, Peter made the executive decision that we would finance all the necessary renovations. I wanted to support my family in any way I could, but taking on all these expenses was daunting. Our household costs surged, and I was left reeling under the financial pressure. With Peter's business struggling to find its footing amid frequent contract cancellations and limited new opportunities, his earnings had plummeted, leaving me to shoulder our living expenses and the hefty loan payments alone. Despite the near collapse of his income, Peter seemed detached from our financial difficulties, dismissing my concerns and acting as if the problem belonged to someone else. As a result, our credit card debt started mounting, exacerbated by Peter's nights out under the guise of building client relationships. Confronted with a future overwhelmed by debt, I suggested drastic measures, either sell the house or shut down the business. Peter, however, remained optimistic, dismissing the idea that we were close to financial collapse and suggesting we simply needed to persevere. The stark reality was that we were only scraping by because of my steady income. I was the one shouldering our financial burdens, and Peter seemed oblivious to the gravity of our situation. Trying to discuss it felt increasingly futile, especially as long as the bills were being paid on time. Our daily exchanges dwindled, and though I knew Peter was seeing other women under the pretense of work, my feelings toward him had cooled to indifference. One evening, after I came home from work, Peter broke a long-standing silence between us. With a smirk, He flung a piece of paper in front of me and announced, "I've decided to divorce you. Please sign here." I took a deep breath, surprisingly calm as I accepted both his words and the divorce papers. Part of my tranquility came from the fact that I had been contemplating asking for a divorce myself had he not beaten me to it. "Can we wait a moment? I just got home. Let's sit down in the living room to discuss this," I suggested. "You wanted to talk, but now you're dragging this out?" he asked, irritation coloring his tone. "I don't need any pointless chit-chat. Just get it over with," he snapped. I deliberately slowed my pace to the living room, feeling Peter's impatience mounting. It was frustrating how everything was unfolding entirely on his terms, and I chose to extend the moment, albeit a bit longer, on mine. Regardless, the decision was set: divorce. The days we had spent together building a home with such care were drawing to a close. I wanted to savor these final moments at my own pace. As I settled onto the sofa, I picked up the divorce papers again. They felt flimsy in my hands, much like the marriage registration we had signed 12 years ago, mirroring my current state of mind. "How long are you going to just sit there staring at them?" Peter demanded, his voice edged with annoyance. "I wanted to discuss our plans after the divorce. What do you intend to do afterward? It sounds like you're reconsidering our decision to separate. While I am committed to proceeding with the divorce, I think it's important we talk it through before everything is finalized. I've heard you're planning to remarry. Is there someone new in your life? She must be quite successful, young, and attractive, unlike myself, an older woman who didn't even share children with you. Are you planning to use her for her financial abilities next? You seem to think poorly of me, but let me be clear. I have always managed our finances effectively, and you never had to be concerned about our bills. Despite your superior attitude, I believe I will be better off without you. The divorce, frankly, is a relief to me. I'll dismiss your harsh words as the frustrated venting of someone who feels defeated. Perhaps I should say more, but soon I won't have to deal with seeing you anymore. Please ensure you move out by the end of this week. Actually, I'm leaving today. I can't bear to hear your voice any longer. By the way, is your new partner aware of the debts you're carrying? She has, I assume, agreed to help with the expenses and contribute $1,000 a month towards our living arrangements. It shouldn't be too hard for her, unlike it was for you. Once I sign the divorce papers, I'm planning to leave immediately with my things already packed. I'll leave the rest of the furniture as part of our asset division. Feel free to dispose of it if it's of no use to you. Just go. And I truly wish your new girlfriend the best of luck managing a hefty $6,000 monthly loan payment. I've left a note detailing the loan information for her, with all the details clearly outlined. I handed Peter the note, got into my car, and drove away from the home that once felt so familiar. As I pulled away, my destination was clear: City Hall, where I was about to submit the divorce papers. A wave of relief washed over me. It felt like a burden had been lifted from my shoulders. Looking back, I realized I should have taken this step much sooner. I had spent too long worrying about him and how he would handle the loan payments. A week after the divorce, I woke up one morning to my phone ringing off the hook. It was Peter, and while I had expected him to reach out, I couldn't help but feel annoyed by the constant interruptions. Finally, I decided to pick up the phone. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my irritation in check. "I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't important," he replied, sounding defensive. "But is it true what I heard about the $6,000? I sighed deeply. "I have no reason to lie about this. Are you expecting me to cover your debts now? Maybe I should have communicated everything more clearly in the note instead of assuming he would understand. Despite the inconvenience, everything you need to know is laid out in that note," I explained. "I thought you would grasp it if you took the time to read it." "I'm calling because I still don't get it, even after reading it," he insisted, his voice tinged with frustration. I took a breath, preparing to break it down for him. "Okay, let me explain. Besides the mortgage on the house, there are additional expenses you have to consider. There are the renovation costs for your parents' home, the personal loan taken out for your father's medical bills, the business loan for that venture of yours, and then there's the credit card debt, all of it in your name. If it were just the mortgage, I might have been able to manage it, I continued. But there's so much more to this. If you're uncertain, feel free to verify it. I helped you with these responsibilities because I was your wife, but now that we're divorced, it's not my concern anymore. I told you when I left that there's a monthly payment of $6,000 due, I reminded him. Do you think this is a joke? You've spent money like it was nothing, and now it's catching up to you. Have you ever thought about those monthly payments? Well, now you'll have to deal with them alongside your new girlfriend. Isn't that why you divorced me in the first place? Actually, she broke up with me, Peter replied. She said that $6,000 a month is too much to handle. I figured as much. It's understandable. Even someone with a high income would hesitate to take on a $6,000 monthly payment for debts they didn't create. No one wants to spend 22 times the value of a house over many years. Did you earn that much after changing jobs? I asked. Yes, my salary increased 5-fold when I switched jobs, he admitted, but all that extra income goes straight to repayments. I had no idea you were making that much, I said, surprised. If I had known, I wouldn't have suggested the divorce. It's not that you didn't know, he countered. You just weren't interested. After I switched jobs, you never asked about my work or how much I was making. You should have brought it up yourself, I responded. You never discussed your income either. Even when we worked together, you barely communicated. Once you became independent and had little to no income, you kept spending money like it was endless. I figured it would be pointless to bring it up, he said, his tone frustrated. Let's start over. Come back to me, he pleaded. I refuse, I stated firmly. I finally achieved my freedom. What about those payments? $6,000 a month is completely unmanageable. Why not sell the house and use your income to pay off the remaining debts? He suggested. If you adjust the repayment plan, you might be able to handle it. Why would I continue with payments? I have no involvement with you anymore, I replied, my voice steady. I'm not interested in a stranger's debts. You're incredibly cold, he said, sounding hurt. Don't you have any empathy? I may seem cold, but I've been making significant payments for over 7 years, I explained. Part of it was out of love for you, but a lot of it was out of obligation to your parents. If you had wanted to come back, things might have been different, but you chose the divorce on your own. I took a deep breath before continuing. Technically, I have the right to sell the house, divide the assets, and even claim alimony for adultery if I wanted to. But before I dealt with all that, I wanted to focus on my well-being. I was done with someone who pretended to be wealthy while wasting money. I was exhausted from constantly covering for your reckless debts. My life is my own now, and I didn't want to be involved in his financial mess any longer. With that, I ended the call. After our conversation, Peter ceased to interfere in my life. The relief I felt when everything was finally settled was overwhelming. I later learned that he had to give up his job and the house, forcing him to create a new repayment plan for his loans. It couldn't have been easy for him to return to his old job, especially under the watchful eyes of others. Despite all this, he was still left with the burden of loan payments. I also heard that his parents made the difficult decision to sell their house and move to a retirement home. It saddened me to think they wouldn't have faced such a choice if we hadn't divorced. To help them during this transition, I assisted with their move and contributed financially to their entry fees. This was my way of repaying the kindness they had always shown me. I genuinely hope they can now enjoy a peaceful life without the stress of $6,000 monthly payments hanging over their heads. As for me, I have been living comfortably by embracing a naturally frugal lifestyle. My savings have steadily increased, and I'm looking into investing to secure my financial future. Currently, I'm moving forward with a new partner I met after my divorce. Each day is fulfilling, both professionally and personally, and I'm finally finding the happiness I have been missing for so long.